Hello, my friend. I'm Paul. Welcome to Night of Tales, a quiet refuge for imagination and dreams. Set aside your worries, as tonight we journey together through worlds of magic, mystery, and wonder. Lie back, relax, and let the tales carry you away. Tonight we venture into the monster-haunted world of The Witcher. The sun hung over the province of Ebbing like a heavy burning copper plate. It was a stationary eye in a sky of pale dusty blue. There were no clouds to offer a reprieve. The heat was a physical weight on Geralt's shoulders. He felt it through his black leather tunic. He felt it in the dry air he breathed. Every breath tasted of salt and fine, red silt. This was the heart of the South. This was a land of ancient dust and long memories. It was a place where the earth seemed to remember the weight of empires long turned to sand. Roach moved with a steady, rhythmic gait. Her hooves made a hollow sound on the parched road. It was a slow, deliberate march. The Witcher did not urge her to go faster. There was no reason to hurry. The path was not a race. It was a state of being. He watched the horizon. To the east, the jagged peaks of the Mahaka Mountains were invisible in the heat haze. To the west, the land rolled toward the sea. Here, in the center, there was only the plain. It was covered in yellow withered grass. It was covered in shrubs that clawed at the air with thorny fingers. They looked like the hands of the buried. Geralt adjusted the strap of his silver sword. The leather was stiff from the heat. The pommel of the blade was warm to the touch. He felt a bead of sweat trickle down his spine. He did not wipe it away. He was used to discomfort. A Witcher was a creature of thresholds. He lived between the cold of the mountains and the heat of the plains. He lived between the world of men and the world of monsters. Often, the distinction between the two was as thin as a razor blade. He passed a ruined wayside shrine. It was dedicated to a forgotten goddess of the harvest. The stone was cracked. The face of the statue had been worn away by years of wind and sand. Someone had placed a small, wilted bunch of wildflowers at its base. They were brown and brittle now. They were a tribute to a hope that had failed. Geralt did not stop. He had seen 1,000 such shrines. He knew that gods were like kings. They ruled as long as people believed in them. When the belief died, the stone remained, and stone had no mercy. It was indifferent to prayer and sacrifice. It was a cold witness to the passage of time. The road began to wind upward. The ground became rocky. The red silt gave way to gray shale. This was the approach to the foothills. This was where the province of Ebbing began to lose its softness. The village of Castle was not far now. He could smell the smoke of the peat fires. It was a sharp, acrid smell. It cut through the scent of the dry grass. It was the scent of civilization. It was the scent of people trying to hold back the dark. It was the smell of fear and survival. Geralt reached for his water skin. He took a small sip. The water was lukewarm. It tasted of leather and iron. He rinsed his mouth and swallowed slowly. He looked at Roach. Her ears were flicking back and forth. She was uneasy. She could feel the change in the air. The temperature was dropping as they climbed. The shadows were growing longer. They were stretching out from the rocks like dark, hungry animals. The silence of the hills was becoming heavy. It was a silence that carried a weight. It was a silence that preceded a storm. The Witcher felt his medallion vibrate. It was a subtle, low-frequency hum. It was a warning from the Silver Wolf. There was magic nearby. It was not the bright, chaotic magic of a sorceress. It was something older. It was something stagnant. It was the magic of a place that had been left alone for too long. He looked up at the cliffs. High above, the fortress of Stigga sat in silence. It was a dark silhouette against the setting sun. It looked like a crown made of thorns. It looked like a prison for the wind. It was a fortress built on the bones of the mountain. He guided Roach toward the first houses of the village. The street was narrow. The walls were made of rough-hewn basalt. The windows were small and dark. They looked like eyes that had forgotten how to blink. People stood in the doorways. They did not wave. They did not call out. They only watched. They saw the white hair. They saw the two swords. They knew what he was. They knew why he had come. He was the end of their mystery. He was the cold steel that would address their fear. He was the Witcher. The inn there was called the Broken Wheel. It was a low, damp building. The ceiling was held up by massive beams of blackened oak. The air inside was thick with the smell of tallow and sour ale. Geralt sat in a corner. He was far from the hearth. He did not need the warmth. He needed the shadow. He watched the room with his yellow cat-like eyes. He saw the way the villagers whispered. He saw the way they avoided his gaze. They spoke in hushed tones about the mountain. They spoke about the things that lived in the height. They spoke of Stigga. A man approached the table. He was dressed in a coat of fine wool. It was the clothing of a man who managed money and lands. This was Bilar. He was the factor of the district. He sat down without an invitation. He placed a heavy purse on the table. The sound of the coins was muffled by the wood. It was a heavy sound. It was the sound of a desperate bribe. It was the sound of a man buying a miracle. The factor spoke in a low voice. We have a problem in the heights. Geralt did not touch the purse. He did not look at the coins. Tell me about the castle. Tell me about Stigga. Balar wiped his forehead with a silk handkerchief. He looked nervous. His fingers were trembling. It is an old place. It belonged to the lords of Ebbing before the wars. Then a man named Amavet took it. He was a scholar of the dark arts. He was a man who wanted to hear the voices of the stars. He died a century ago. The castle has been empty ever since. No one goes there, not even the bandits. They say the wind there carries the plague of madness. They say the stones remember his screams. The factor paused. He looked toward the door as if he expected something to enter. But 3 months ago, the grinding began. Every night, when the moon reaches the zenith, the mountain begins to shake. It is a sound of stone rubbing against stone. It is a sound of something moving in the dark. It is loud. It is relentless. It makes the wine in the casks go sour. It makes the children wake up screaming. They say the castle is waking up. They say the ancient magic of Amavet has returned from the grave. They say the earth is growing under a weight we cannot see. Geralt leaned forward. And the disappearances? Balar nodded slowly. 5 people are gone. 3 shepherds from the high pastures. 2 miners from the copper vein. We found their equipment. We found their boots. But we found no bodies. We found only a fine gray dust. It covers the rocks like snow. It has a smell like burnt hair. It has a smell like old lightning. We are afraid. We are afraid the mountain will swallow us all. We are afraid of the gray snow. The Witcher considered the words. He knew of creatures that could turn bone to ash. He knew of experimental horrors. The description of the dust suggested something chemical. It suggested the work of a sorcerer who dealt in the science of life and death. Amavet might be dead, but his laboratory was still active. It was a legacy of biomagical waste. It was a hunger that had been left unattended. I will go to the fortress. I will need a guide to the lower tunnels. The factor shook his head. No one will go with you. The people are terrified. They believe the castle is eating the mountain. They believe it is a living thing. You must go alone. You must be the one to face the silence. You must be the one to stop the vibration. Geralt stood up. He reached for the purse. He felt the weight. It was enough for a long stay in the south. It was enough to buy a new saddle for Roach. It was the price of a dangerous contract. It was the price of a life risk for a village of strangers. He tucked the purse into his belt. I will need a lantern. I will need 10 gallons of oil. I will need a map of the lower excavations. Balar stood up as well. He looked relieved. He looked like a man who had just passed a heavy burden to someone else. The map is in my office. The oil will be at the gate. Please, Make it stop. The village cannot live like this. The silence is being replaced by the sound of the void. We want our nights back. We want to sleep without the sound of the grinding stone. We want the mountain to be silent again. Geralt left the inn. The night air was cool. The stars were bright and cold. He looked up at Stigga. The fortress was no longer a shadow. It was a presence. He could feel the vibration in the soles of his boots. The grinding had begun. It was a low subsonic thrum. It felt like the heartbeat of a giant. It felt like the countdown to a catastrophe. He went to the stable and spent an hour preparing. He applied oil to his silver blade. He checked the tension of his crossbow. He took a vial of the elixir called Cat. He did not drink it yet. He would wait for the tunnels. He spoke to Roach. Stay here. Do not let anyone touch the bags. The horse whinnied. She understood. She was a witcher's horse. She had seen the monsters. She had seen the men who were worse than monsters. Geralt turned toward the mountain path. He vanished into the darkness of the rocks. He moved without sound. He was a ghost in a land of ghosts. He was a shadow entering the belly of the beast. The path to Stigga was a narrow ribbon of gray stone. It wound through the jagged cliffs of the Amel foothills. The air here was thin. It was cold. The heat of the day was a distant memory. Geralt climbed steadily. His boots crunched on the loose shale. Every step was a calculation. Every movement was an exercise in balance. The wind howled through the narrow crevices. It sounded like a flute played by a madman. It carried the scent of wet stone and ancient decay. It carried the smell of ozone. The fortress loomed above him. It was built into the side of the mountain. It was an extension of the rock. The walls were made of massive blocks of basalt. They were black and smooth. There were no decorations. There were no carvings of lions or eagles. There were only the narrow slits of the archer's windows. The architecture was functional. It was brutal. It was designed to keep the world out. It was a monument to isolation. It was a temple to the ego of a dead man. Geralt reached the outer gate. The wood had rotted away centuries ago. The iron hinges were red with rust. He stepped into the courtyard. The ground was covered in the gray dust. It was thick. It muffled the sound of his footsteps. He knelt down. He rubbed a pinch of the dust between his fingers. It was cold. It felt like powdered glass. It did not smell of earth. It smelled of the void. It was the ash of creation. It was the byproduct of a magical process that consumed matter. The grinding was louder here. It was a roar of gears. It was a scream of friction. The sound seemed to come from the ground itself. The vibrations were so strong that the dust danced in the air. It formed tiny swirling patterns. They looked like runes. They looked like a language that only the stone understood. It was a conversation between the mountain and the machine. It was a ritual of destruction. The Witcher found the entrance to the lower vaults. It was a square opening in the base of the central tower. A set of stairs led down into the blackness. The air coming from below was stagnant. It was heavy with the scent of old magic. Geralt took the vial of cat from his belt. He uncorked it. The smell was sharp and bitter. He drank it in one go. He felt the cold fire of the elixir spread through his veins. He felt his heart slow to a crawl. The reaction was immediate. His pupils expanded until his eyes were entirely black. The world shifted. The darkness did not vanish. It became transparent. He could see the heat rising from his own skin. He could see the fine veins in the stone walls. He could see the stairs descending into a vast underground chamber. He could see the ghosts of the air moving in the draft. He could see the flow of magic. He drew his silver sword. The blade was a sliver of white light in the gray world of his vision. He moved down the stairs. Each step was a descent into a deeper silence. The grinding sound was no longer a noise. It was a physical force. It pushed against his chest. It made his heart beat in a different rhythm. It was the music of a nightmare. It was the pulse of a dead star. He reached the bottom of the stairs. He was in a hall of immense proportions. The ceiling was supported by pillars shaped like twisted trees. They were made of dark obsidian. The walls were covered in inscriptions in the Elder speech. They were the names of stars. They were the coordinates of the heavens. In the center of the hall, a great apparatus was active. It was a forest of crystal spires and iron conduits. They were driven by a stream of dark water that fell from a hole in the ceiling. The water was black and oily. It hit a central basin with a sound like thunder. The crystals were spinning. They were grinding against the air itself. They were pulverizing blocks of white marble to feed a magical furnace. But the apparatus was doing more than milling stone. At the top of the central spire, a sphere of crystal was pulsing. It was glowing with a pale violet light. Every time the crystals completed a rotation, a spark of energy jumped to the ceiling. The sparks were forming a pattern. They were weaving a web of light. They were opening a door. Geralt felt his medallion hit his chest with frantic strength. The apparatus was a focus. It was a device designed to thin the veil between worlds. It was a resonator. Amavet had not been a simple scholar. He had been an engineer of the impossible. He had built a door, and something was trying to walk through it. Something that did not belong in the province of Ebbing. Something that was hungry for the world. The Witcher stood in the shadow of a pillar. He watched the apparatus. He looked for a weakness. He saw the central spire. It was a pillar of tempered steel and glass. It was the heart of the system. If he could shatter the crystal, the resonance would stop. But he was not alone in the hall. He could feel a presence. It was a cold alien intelligence. It was watching him from the dark corners of the chamber. It was waiting for him to move. Something moved in the darkness behind the crystals. It was a shadow that did not belong to the pillars. It was tall and thin. It had many limbs. It moved with the jerky, unnatural precision of a predator. This was the Hydra. It was a creature of the void. It was a biological horror made of chitin and mutagenic waste. It was the guardian of the gate. It was the experiment that had survived its master. The Hydra stepped into the light of the crystal. It was a terrifying sight. Its body was composed of segments of black polished armor. Its legs were like long silver needles. It had a flat eyeless head. It had a cluster of glowing red sensory organs in the center of its torso. It held a pair of serrated blades in its upper limbs. They were not steel. They were bone. They were covered in the same gray dust. This was the source of the disappearances. This was the shepherd of the gate. It was a creature designed for one purpose. It was designed to kill. The Hydra sensed the Witcher. It did not roar. It did not growl. It emitted a high-frequency whistle. The sound was like a needle in Geralt's brain. He winced but did not lose his focus. He stepped out from the shadow. He raised his sword. The silver reflected the violet light of the apparatus. He breathed slowly. He waited for the attack. He was the hunter now. The construct moved with incredible speed. It did not run. It skated across the dust. It was a blur of black and chitin. Geralt rolled to the side. He felt the wind of the blades. They hit the stone pillar with a force that shattered the basalt. The Hydra did not pause. It spun around and struck again. Its movements were fast. They were perfect. It was a masterpiece of biological engineering. It was a nightmare in the flesh. The Witcher used the sign of Quen. A golden shield of energy formed around him. He lunged forward. He struck the Hydra's flank. The silver sword sparked against the chitin. It was like hitting a diamond. The blade did not cut deep. It only left a shallow white scratch. The Hydra was immune to simple strikes. It required a weakness. It required an opening in the armor. The construct struck the golden shield with both blades. The energy of the sign shattered like glass. Geralt was thrown back. He hit the floor and rolled. He came up on one knee. He realized he could not win a test of strength. He had to be smarter. He had to use the environment. He had to use the apparatus against its guardian. He had to break the flow of power. He ran toward the central basin. The black water was splashing everywhere. The air was thick with mist. The eider followed him. It climbed the obsidian pillars. It dropped from above. Geralt used the sign of Ard. A blast of kinetic energy hit the construct in midair. It was pushed back into the path of the spinning crystals. It was a moment of chaos. It was a moment of chance. The eider's silver leg caught in the gap between two crystals. There was a sound of snapping bone. The construct let out a screech of feedback. The apparatus groaned. The vibration in the hall changed. The violet light of the sphere flickered. The resonance was breaking. The eider struggled to free itself. It lashed out with its blades, cutting through the iron conduits. It was destroying the very thing it was meant to protect. Geralt did not waste the moment. He ran to the central spire. He saw a gap between the primary crystal and the support beam. He took a heavy iron spike from his belt. It was a tool he used for securing traps. He jammed the spike into the gap. He struck it with the pommel of his sword. He put all his strength into the blow. He put all his will into the strike. The effect was instantaneous. The crystal hit the spike. The iron was harder than the glass. The crystal shattered. The chain reaction spread through the apparatus. Spires snapped. Iron conduits whipped through the air. The central axle began to bend. The marble blocks shattered into a cloud of white dust. The air was filled with the smell of ozone and burnt hair. The eider screamed. It was a sound of total agony. It was linked to the magic of the hall. As the crystals broke, the construct's body began to crack. The glowing red organs dimmed. It tried to reach for Geralt. Its movements were slow. They were broken. It was a dying horror in a dying castle. It was a legacy that was finally ending. The Witcher stepped forward. He swung his silver sword with all his strength. He targeted the gap in the chitin where the legs met the torso. The blade bit deep. It cut through the mutagenic core. A spray of pale cold fluid hit the floor. The eider collapsed. It fell into the heap of broken glass and iron. The apparatus shuddered one last time and stopped. The violet light vanished. The only sound in the hall was the rushing of the water. The grinding was gone. The silence had returned to Stigga. Geralt stood in the center of the hall. He was breathing hard. The effects of the cat elixir were beginning to fade. The world was regaining its color. The gray dust was settling. The ruins of the apparatus looked like the skeleton of a prehistoric beast. It was a monument to a madness that had finally been put to rest. The Witcher felt a deep, hollow exhaustion. Every victory on the path came with a price. Every monster slain left a scar on the soul. Every contract was a step toward the end. He walked to the Eiger. The construct was dead. It was nothing more than scrap metal and organic resin. He looked at the shattered crystal. It had lost its glow. The resonance was over. The door was closed. Whatever had been trying to enter from the void was now trapped on the other side. The province of Ebbing was safe for another night. The village of Castle was safe. The shepherds could return to the hills. The Witcher climbed back to the surface. He emerged into the dawn. The sun was rising over the peaks of the Amel Mountains. It was a soft golden light. It did not burn. It promised a new day. He looked at the village in the valley below. It looked peaceful. The smoke from the chimneys was straight and blue. The people were waking up. They were waking up to a world without the grinding. They were waking up to a world that was a little bit safer. He descended the mountain path. He moved with the slow, heavy step of a man who had finished a long labor. He felt the weight of his years. He felt the weight of his mutations. He was tired. He was a man made of silver and iron and old wounds. But he was alive. And as long as he was alive, the path would continue. He would find another village. He would find another mystery. He reached the village gate. Bilar was waiting for him. The factor looked at the Witcher's face. He saw the soot. He saw the pale fluid on the leather tunic. He saw the exhaustion in the yellow eyes. He saw the truth that the villagers would never understand. He saw the price of the miracle. It is over. Geralt spoke in a voice that was like gravel. The apparatus is broken. The guardian is dead. You will hear no more grinding. The mountain belongs to the wind again. You can sleep now. Bilar did not speak. He reached into his coat and produced the rest of the payment. He handed the purse to Geralt. The Witcher took it without a word. He did not want thanks. He did not want a celebration. He wanted to leave. He wanted the road. He wanted the anonymity of the dust. He went to the stable. Roach was waiting for him. She nuzzled his shoulder. She smelled the iron and the ozone. Geralt saddled her. He checked the cinches. He mounted the horse and rode out of the village. He did not look back. He did not look at the people who were already beginning to gossip about him. He was a shadow leaving a world of light. The people of Castle watched him go. They stood in their doorways. They were already beginning to forget the fear. They were already beginning to invent a new story. They would tell tales of ghosts and demons. They would tell tales of a white-haired savior. But they would never understand the truth. They would never understand the cold logic of the void. They would never understand the man who lived in the shadows. They would never understand the Witcher. Geralt rode toward the south. He rode away from the cliffs of Stigga. The road was long. The dust was red. The sun was climbing into the sky. He felt the heat returning. He felt the weight of the path. He thought of the library at Kaer Morhen. He thought of the old books. He thought of the warnings of the masters. They had always said that the world was a fragile thing. They had always said that there were doors that should never be opened. He spoke to Roach. We will find a stream. We will find a place with green grass. We will find a place where the air does not smell of iron. We will find a place to rest. The horse whinnied softly. She accelerated her pace. There were two shadows on the vast plain of Ebbing. They were small against the horizon. They were moving toward the next mystery. They were moving toward the next shadow. The world was a vast place. It was full of things that needed to be put to rest. It was full of secrets that were better left buried. The silence of the province was complete now. The heartbeat of the apparatus had faded into the earth. The mountain was just a mountain. The castle was just a tomb. The Witcher rode on. He did not look back. He had done his work. He had earned his gold. He was a creature of the path. And the path never ended. It only led to the next sunset. It only led to the next sunrise. It led to the end of the world. The copper sun reached its zenith. It shone down on the red dust. It shone down on the white hair of the rider. The world went on. The story continued. And in the heights of Ebbing, the stones of Stigga waited for the next master. They waited for the next echo. They waited for the next shadow. But the Witcher was gone. He was a memory in the wind. He was the silence that followed the storm. He was the ghost of the path.